Hey, what's up, guys? So tonight I want to do a video on holsters. I got a question from a buddy of mine, and his agency recently allowed them to change their holsters up. Before they were wearing thigh rig holsters. So I'm not going to talk necessarily about holsters itself, but just holster setups and holster heights, and give you my 2 cents on what I recommend is the best height for your holster and why I think so. So the first thing I want to talk about is the different holster setups, the different holster heights that we see typically, right? Usually at my classes, I see a couple different ones. I'll see either like a straight waistline holster that's right here on his belt line, and then I'll see something like a mid-ride, something that I normally use. I'll see a low ride. I also have one of those. And then I'll see a thigh rig holster. So those are really the 4 different holster heights that you can wear. But I want to talk about the different holster heights and what they mean to you as a shooter and what they mean to your body's mechanics. Alright, so the one that we're just going to do away with from the get-go is thigh rigs. I see thigh rigs still being used by some folks. I think in Special Forces we did away with thigh rigs like 12 or 15 years ago. You know, I mean, when I got to group, I didn't see anybody wearing thigh rigs back then. So I'm pretty sure that they got rid of them at least 15, 16 years ago. I don't know. But they're still around. I remember seeing them laying around. But no one ever used them. We learned that thigh rigs are not the best height to wear your holster. And the reason for that is because what it does to your draw stroke, right? When I wear a thigh rig holster, it is sitting on my thigh. It is not sitting any higher than where my thigh is. And of course, there's a little bit of adjustment there, right? But even if you get it at the highest setting on your thigh, it's still too low. And what I mean by that is when I'm drawing, if I have to bend my body at all like this to get my gun and draw it, and then I have to straighten my body out to come back up and get that margin present, that is too low, right? As a shooter, you need to try to isolate your upper torso as much as possible. So everything happens here without your body moving, without your shoulders dropping or whatever, you know what I mean, without you bending over at the waist. Everything needs to happen. So the way we set up our range belts and the way we set up our holster is where I can get to it without having to compromise my body. I don't lean, you know what I mean? And the same thing with anything else that we wear on our range belts, right? And actually, you know, the only people I see wearing thigh rigs these days are smaller law enforcement agencies, typically like sheriffs and stuff like that. And then I have seen TSA agents wear them. I've also seen some security guard companies issue that out to their guys. And maybe it's just a budget thing. Maybe it's a mindset thing. Maybe like for their chain of command is just old school and they won't kind of adapt. It happens. It happens in law enforcement a lot. And law enforcement guys, you can vouch. Right? This is just my experience from talking to a bunch of law enforcement people. But let's just throw that one out, okay? Because I am reaching way too low to get to that gun, and then I have to straighten my body out as I'm drawing and do all this, and it's just excessive movement, extra steps. It's throwing my shot off. Plus, your static stance should always set you up for movement. So now I have to draw and move to one side. That makes no sense to me. All right. So we're going to throw that one out. That leaves us with either a low ride holster, right, or a mid ride holster, or a waistline. Now let's talk about waistline really quick. Waistline holsters are pretty popular. You know, a lot of like, if you're doing any kind of like conceal work, if you're doing any kind of like low vis stuff, you know, you usually see like the upper echelon of law enforcement agencies, like, you know, detectives and maybe some you know, plain clothes maybe will kind of conceal a holster on their waistline, and that completely makes sense. I've done it too. Low vis stuff, conceal stuff, I've worn a holster on my waistline. But as a range holster, that's not ideal. As a training holster, that's not ideal. Now, if it's part of your job to wear a holster like that and that's mandated to you, then by all means train that way. All right, but we're talking. I'm mainly addressing more, I guess, the enthusiasts and the shooter community, not so much the shooter profession. Okay, so hopefully no one takes offense to that. But us in the shooter community, we are trying to set up that holster best so that we can use it for training, right? So OWB holsters, typically, we're not going to get into conceal holsters, that's a whole different topic. But when we train for OWB holsters, there's a couple ideal positions to set that holster height at, and that's mid ride and low ride. But waistline holsters obviously are not the best holsters to train with. Again, because I have to compromise my body mechanics to get to that holster. I just can't simply do one of these, like come back here and draw, because my arm, my wrist goes only so high before I have to drop this shoulder to compensate. So what I see a lot of is people will bend to the opposite side to get that holster out, and then they'll straighten out their bodies and present out, right? And the reason they have to bend that way is because, one, they could be fighting their own body composition, or two, they could be fighting a plate carrier or gear or maybe a big jacket or something, and they have to fight that to get that holster out, okay? So waistline holsters, if you can stay away from them, stay away from them. Unless it's part of your profession, then please train with them, okay? Now, let's get to the most ideal holster heights, and that is a low ride and a mid ride. I have both. And in fact, on this holster here, on my Safari Land, I have a mid ride. If you guys can see that, right? So that is sitting, oops, there you go. So that is sitting about 1.5 inches off my waistline. Okay, that is a mid ride. Now, typically, I wear a padded range belt, and this mid ride is perfect because the padded range belt sits off my waist a little bit lower, kind of cowboy style. But with this Blue Alpha Gear double belt rig system that has an inner, the inner goes on my waist and this outer goes right over that. So now it sits higher. So now this mid ride is too high for me, and I need to put the low ride paddle on there, right? So I can kind of drop that holster down a little bit more. Is it going to be enough? Probably not, but we'll see. We'll see. Okay. Now, there's a rule of thumb when we set up our holster height, if we can help it on your range belt. There's a good rule of thumb, and I'm going to show that to you guys right now, and hopefully this helps you, because again, we don't want to, if I have a waistline holster, I have to do this to draw. If I have a thigh, if I have a thigh holster, I have to bend down to get that and then pull out, and I'm bending my body towards that holster again. But I want to isolate my body's mechanics. So the rule of thumb that we use is that we put our arms down by our side, and then we make an L shape with our fingers. The bottom of the holster should sit right there where my fingers make that L. So it should sit flat. And if I make an L shape, right? So this holster is sitting just a little bit higher than I want it to be. And when I'm drawing, now notice how I'm not moving my body at all to get to this holster. This holster is sitting at a pretty decent height. Could I drop it a little bit more? Yeah, I could. So if I did this, then now it's sitting at the perfect height for me. Now it's at, this is where I want my holster to be. For me, and for most of us, this is where it should be. I put my arm down by my side, made that L shape, and the bottom of the holster is parallel and flat with my fingers. That is the rule of thumb that we use to set up holsters. And so holster height. So hopefully that answers your guys' question. Next time you're setting up your holster, use that rule of thumb. It's going to help you out tremendously. You're not going to compromise your body's mechanics to draw that gun and every mechanic that follows that. You're not going to bend that way or this way to get to that gun. You are going to have a perfect draw, isolated upper torso. Everything else is fucking money, okay? If you have any more questions regarding holsters, please DM me, comment on this video. And, you know, this is really to educate you guys, because I see it a lot. And no one's really teaching anybody on holster height and how to wear a holster. So here I am doing my part, and hopefully that this, you know, this video gets around, or you guys can share it or whatever. But now you have, you know, my 2 cents on how to set up your holster height and why I prefer to do it that way. Going away from that thigh rig, explain the pros and cons of that. Really no pros there. And then the waistline holster, kind of explain the pros and cons of that and why people still do that. Obviously, it's for professional reasons. Okay, but if you can get a mid ride or a low ride drop down paddle for your holster, you're gonna be. It's just going to feel like a world of difference to you guys. All right, so that's my suggestion. I hope you guys got something out of this and learned something. If not, you know, adopting that method or not. And if you guys need anything, again, DM me. Okay, thanks for tuning in, guys. Appreciate it. Cheers.